Let's talk about Globus. Globus is a tool that's built by the institutions in partnership by the institutions you see at the bottom of the screen here, the Computation Institute, the Argonne National Laboratory, and the University of Chicago. And it was built originally and principally to do data transfer and really large data transfers. And so we'll talk about that in just a moment. What we're seeing it used as, what I'm seeing it used as, particularly in areas that perhaps don't need data transfer so much, but they need access to storage, is the new web interface to Globus, because originally it was a command line tool. It is still a command line tool in the back end, and you have you have command line tool access to it. So if you want to build it into your scripts and have programs that automatically are pushing and pulling data, even encrypted data with authentication, you can do that with the command line tool. But the web front end makes it as easy as using a tool like OwnCloud, which we just saw, where you're basically dragging and dropping data. And so you can have access to Compute Canada repositories in the order of terabytes, and you're able to get access to that through a web interface and move data. And not just move data from your computer to our system or from that system to the computer you're doing the interface on. If you have access to other computers in the network as well, you can push and pull data to and from those to other computers. So your computer really can just act as a broker or the negotiator for that original data transfer. And you can move data from repositories here in Canada to repositories elsewhere in the world. And that's a really nice feature. So if you're looking for terabytes of storage, I'm going to tell you in just a moment how you can use Globus to get access to at least 1.5 terabytes of storage, 500 gigabytes of which will be backed up to tape. And that's pretty nice. So Globus is its own organization run by those three groups that I just pointed out. Compute Canada has licensed OwnCloud, has licensed Globus, and it's a service that we're providing. So everybody has access to the base level of service, but there's also an additional level of service called Globus Plus. And what I recommend that everybody who's listening right now, if you think that you might use Globus, it's worth your time right now to open up your email client and send an email to globus@computecanada.ca. So Globus spelled just like it is here on the screen at ComputeCanada, all one word, .ca. And all you need to say in that email, send it from your Compute Canada account email. So usually that's your institutional email. You're going to ask them to turn on Globus Plus. This is free. Everybody has access to it, but you need to ask to have it turned on right now. And what Globus Plus will do is instead of you having to move data to and from your own computer, it will allow you to move data to and from other computers, right? Even if they're not part of the Compute Canada network. So it gives you that extra bit of access and control. You may never use it, but if you ask them to turn it on and it turns out you do need it, you won't be stumped in the future, whether it's 6 months or a year and a half from now, wondering why I can't do this thing that I saw John do or talk about in the webinar. So what is Globus in the background and how does it work? Let's think of data and transferring data as pushing content, little packets, through a pipe. How that transfer normally works is we slowly start pushing more and more packets through the pipe until we get to the point where the pipe is full. And then we push the maximum number of packets through the space that's available to us. And this works fine as long as we don't have packet loss. The moment we have packet loss, the system cuts off sending and resets and slowly starts building again until we lose more packets. And so you can imagine that it doesn't take a lot of data loss, just one packet every so often, and you're sending thousands and thousands of these packets, and all of a sudden you have a sawtooth pattern. And with that sawtooth pattern moving data through your pipe, well, all that space above the line is wasted. And so it doesn't take a lot of data loss for you to see serious degradation in terms of your data transfer speeds. What Globus does is it uses a technology called Grid FTP, which in principle opens multiple pipes inside of the larger pipe. And now when you experience packet loss, it's only within one of those smaller pipes. So the other pipes can continue to run full speed. Now, if you're seeing severe packet loss, this won't make a difference. But if you're losing the odd packet every now and then, this is a significant saving. This is a significant mechanism for saving you time, because you can push more data through, because we don't have the full sawtooth pattern across the whole pipe. It has another really nice interface, because once it's running, and it runs as a little client on the systems that you're moving data to and from, once it's there and set up, and you initiate a transfer, you can just forget about it. You can close your laptop, and I'm transferring data from my laptop, and it's not magic. It's not going to continue to do the transfer when I put my laptop to sleep and unplug it from the internet. But the next time I open my laptop, say I need to go home and I connect to the internet, it's going to continue that transfer as long as the Globus tool is running on both of those systems, the one it's coming from and the one it's going to. We already talked a little bit about these personal endpoints and Compute Canada endpoints. The Compute Canada endpoints are these large repositories where there's terabytes, up to petabytes in some cases, of storage that are available. And the personal endpoints are the ones that you're going to build. You're going to build one in just a moment here on your desktop. But you can have multiple of those desktops. And if you want direct access between desktops, you need to turn on Globus Plus. And again, that's just an email to globus@computecanada.ca. The last thing that's particularly attractive with Globus is that it gives you full encryption. So if you have really sensitive data, perhaps you need to move medical data, there are times where, well, I've got an instance right here. People needed to send me a lot of data, and what did they do? They put it on a hard drive, and they mailed it to me, right? Because that's an easy way to move about 1.5 terabytes of data for them, and they feel this is really secure. Well, given that we have access to the high-speed Canary Research Network in Canada, particularly if we're moving data from one institution to another, putting it on a physical device can be expensive, takes a lot of time, and it's not clear in some cases that it really is that much more secure. Here we can turn on encryption. It'll fully encrypt the data, then transfer it, and it will automatically decrypt it at the end using key pair authentication. So, nice service that's available to you. So here's where we're going to go in just a moment. We're going to go to globus.computecanada.ca. So globus.computecanada.ca, and it'll swap over to the HTTPS as needed. And if you needed that email address because you want to send them a note and say, please turn Globus Plus on for my account, and Globus Plus is different from Globus Personal. We'll download that. That's the service that will run on your desktop or your laptop. But Globus Plus is a service that will allow you to connect multiple Globus Personal instances and push and pull data from there. And what you really essentially have the ability to do once that's set up is treat all these systems as a single giant hard drive, where each drive is really its own folder, because you'll have easy drag and drop access to all this. So I'm going to step outside the presentation again, and I'm going to swap over into a browser so that I can log in and I can walk you through the Globus process. So we can get you logged in for the first time. We'll get it installed on your desktop, and we'll show you how to push and pull data to a site within Compute Canada, within WestGrid, called Silo.
Hi, John. I think I've lost your audio. I'm not sure if others have as well.
Here's my audio back.
Oh, yep, thanks very much.
When did we lose it? I don't know. Somehow I turned off the microphone. I apologize.
No,
how far
okay.
back did we lose it?
Just now. So just when you said let's get started with logging in and moving in.
Okay. Well, let's rewind and let's get started with logging in. So this is the interface for the login to Globus, and it has changed within the past month, month and a half. And it may even have changed as recently as a week or so ago. So there might be a few hiccups here, but it should be pretty clean if you're going to follow along. So on the right-hand side of the screen, we have the option to log in to use Compute Canada Globus web app. And it's going to want us, previously, Globus required you to have your own separate Globus login. They don't need that anymore. You can use your institutional login. The trick here is that within Canada, because Compute Canada has licensed Globus, Compute Canada is the institutional group that we're going to log in with. If you pull down this menu on the right-hand side, just click on that little triangle where it says Globus ID. It's taking a bit of time to load that for me here. There we go. And then it went away. So what you'll notice here is a whole lot of universities. And most of them are universities in the US. And so each of these universities has their own accounts with Globus and gives their researchers access. Here in Canada, we just play friendly with everybody as kind of a national group organization. So raw for us, Compute Canada, once you have access to that, you have access to Globus. We don't need to have the individual research institutions like the University of Toronto or Dalhousie or Victoria or wherever you are create their own Globus setup. Compute Canada will do it. So what we're interested here is finding Compute Canada in the list, and it should be there right where the C's are. There's Compute Canada, and that's the login that we're going to use for this. So we're going to choose Compute Canada as our existing organization. If you look for your own university, it's probably not there. So choose Compute Canada, and you're going to choose Continue. And I'm receiving an error here. Globus is not happy with me for some reason. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to try and do that again. Hopefully it's just a one-off error. It is not happy with that at all. Are other people seeing the same error, or is it just me? If it's just me, then I'll try swapping to another browser and see if that's the issue. If it's all of us, then this might be the end of our demo because I can't control Globus. Let me just swap to another browser instance here. So what you're seeing on my screen right now is it's already logged me in. So I'm going to log out here so that we can go through the login process together, and hopefully it will work here. So very similar screen to what we were seeing before. So log into Compute Canada Globus web app. I'm going to choose Continue. Now here we get pushed to the CompuCanada My Proxy. And so we're going to do client authentication here. And so this is going to be your CompuCanada username and password, which may be different from your WestGrid username and password. So we're going to put that in here. And I've got to go to my password keeper to go get that because it's long. And I'm going to sign in. Now, when I sign in, it will take me straight into Globus. When you're signing in for the first time, it may ask you if you want to link to an existing Globus account. Unless you have been using Globus already, and if that's the case, you probably wouldn't be here today as part of this webinar, you want to say no. You do not want to link to an existing Globus ID because you don't have one. If you do have one, then you can say yes, and you can go through the process of taking any endpoints that you created in the past and merging them so that you have one account that you can log in using your institutional ID. But for most of you, you're going to want to choose no. I would probably even go so far as to say all of you, you're going to want to choose no here today. And once you come in, you'll usually be greeted with a transfer files screen, which should look like what you're seeing on my screen. Now, if you're not seeing that screen when you first come in, then the menu at the top, there's an option called Manage Data, and the first option here is Transfer Files. And this is where we're going to start right now. So we'll wait just a moment to see if there's any hiccups here in the process for you, and then we'll go through how to set up endpoints and actually do a file transfer. Just checking Etherpad here to see if there's anything else coming up. Okay. Not seeing any complaints, so I'm going to assume that we're moving forward here. And if there are, just flag them in Etherpad or stick your hand up in another way, and we'll wait and catch you up so that you're not left behind. So, basic setup here, we're going to put content on the left side or the right side, and then we're going to select it, and then using these arrow buttons in the middle of the screen, we're either going to push from left to right or from right to left. To do that, we need access to endpoints. One of the endpoints we'll use for this demo will be a system called Silo. And this is held within WestGrid. It's at the University of Saskatchewan. And your default allocation, so this is the allocation to anybody with a CompuCanada account on Silo, is 1.5 terabytes. So this is a pretty substantial amount of data. And the really nice extra feature here, the cherry on the top, if you will, is that the first 500 gigabytes, or whatever you put inside the home directory on Silo, will also be backed up to tape. So it's not full archival storage by any means, but if you have research data that's important to you, keeping it under your desk on hard drives bought from various places is not a good choice. Putting it here gives you redundancy in storage, right? It's not true that there's multiple copies, but there's copies of pieces of the data throughout the whole system. So if any of the hard drives that make up the system fail, we can pull it out, put in a fresh hard drive, and it rebuilds it from all the little copies elsewhere on the system. So it's like having multiple copies of your data stored somewhere, plus the tape backup in case everything didn't go well one day. Maybe there's a major power failure, there's destruction on the drives, we still have that tape backup. And it's elsewhere, and it's not in the same place that all your other data is. If there was a fire in your office and your laptop went and all the drives under your desk went, It's not real redundancy there. So we're going to give you access to Silo. So first we'll get you into Silo, and then we'll go through how to set up your endpoint on your desktop, and then we'll look at pushing data from one to the other. So we're going to need an endpoint. So in the left panel, I'm going to click on the Start Here option. So I have some recently used endpoints, so an option's going to pop up here. But in the top bar, where it says Start Typing the name of an endpoint or select one below, I'm going to start typing the name of an endpoint. And the endpoint is going to be Compute Canada. And as I start to type compute, you'll see a whole bunch of options appear. Now, these are not all the options that are available, right? So if we look here, we see that Compute Canada hashtag Jasper isn't available. But if I was to type that out in full, it would appear. So this is just a selection of the Compute Canada endpoints. Almost every system on Compute Canada will have a Globus endpoint. So I want to go to Compute Canada, and then hash or a pound symbol, and then I want to go to Silo. Now, for me, because I logged in already this morning to make sure that this part of the demo would work, it's automatically going to display for me the contents of my directory, my account, or portion of Silo. For you, it's going to take you to an authorization screen that will look like the one that you used to get into Globus in the first place. But here, the account that you need is your WestGrid account. This is another case where if you just made your account, you may not be able to get access because it takes a bit of time for all those credentials to percolate through all the systems across all the institutions. And part of that has to do with just trying to coordinate across all these institutions with these separate systems, unlike a commercial vendor which has just lockdown control over everything that they have. So if you're not able to log in, first, check to make sure that you're using your WestGrid credentials, not your Compute Canada ones. And again, this will change in the future. We'll just have single sign-on. But right now, you need your WestGrid. And two, if you only created your account very recently, within, say, the past 24 hours or so, it might not have passed all the way through yet. Once you're in, though, you'll see that we have, you'll just have a folder that says data. You won't have this 2x2 tech file, which is just a demo file that I've been pushing around. So we're waiting for somebody to log in. Let me explain how Silo works. So this space here is the home directory. So 2x2 techgames.tex, that's inside the home directory. This is where anything that's put inside here, you have backed up to tape. The space, or the size of this space, is 500 gigabytes. Data here, this folder, looks like it's inside the home directory, but that's not entirely true. It's better to think of this folder as a pointer to a separate space on the drive that will give you a terabyte of storage. It is not backed up to tape. So there's a difference between home and data. Home is smaller. Data is much bigger, twice the size, but home is backed up to tape. So if you create new folders inside here that are not the data folder, they'll get backed up to tape, up to 500 gigabytes. So there's Silo set up, and we have access to it. I hope you have access to it. If not, again, it's very likely either the account, you're not using your WestGrid credentials, or what's more realistic is you signed up very recently and we haven't propagated it through. The next thing we need to do is install it on your desktop. Now, I've seen this happen in two different ways on two different browsers. So on my browser right now, Get Globus Connect Personal is down in the bottom right-hand corner of the window. On some browsers, and the way it used to be on my browser in the past, it was showing up on the top of the screen, a little link that says Get Globus Connect Personal. And that's what we need to install on our desktop or our laptop to turn it into an endpoint. So I'm going to click on that right now. For me, it's in the bottom. For some of you, it may be on the top. it's going to pop up a new window. Sometimes it's a pop-up window. Sometimes it's just opens within the window that you're currently in. Sometimes it makes a new tab. There's 2 steps for this. There's actually probably 3 because we actually do the install on our system. The first is we need to create a name for our endpoint. So it says display name. Make it something meaningful for you. So I'm going to call this my laptop. And once we have a name, we can click Generate a Setup Key. It's going to generate for us a key that we're going to need to copy and paste. This is part of that key pair authentication that's going to take place in the background that allows Globus to do the encryption. So I've got a key here. You're going to have a separate key on your workstation or when you go through this install process. So I'm just going to hold down Command and press C. You can probably hold Control and C if you're on a Windows environment. Depending on your Linux distribution, you'll have a similar option. And once I've copied that key, I'm now going to do the download and install Globus Connect Personal. So I'm running Mac OS X here. This is a little quicker than the Windows VM I was using. So I'm just going to click the download the install there. And it's only about 7 megabytes. So it shouldn't take very long. And then we're going to run the install procedure. So in OS X, it's just I'm going to drag this icon into the applications folder. If I was in Windows, I would have a little click-through method like you saw with OwnCloud, and it'll look after the install for me. Now I already have an instance of it running, so it's going to ask if I want to keep both or replace. I'm just going to replace it. We'll install the new one. And then you should be able to see a full clean install process for me. Right, so that should take about 15-20 seconds to carry out for you. And so now Globus is installed, but Globus is a service and it's not yet running. So here on OS X, I'm going to need to open Globus. And so that's inside my applications folder. And there's Globus Connect Personal. Should be alphabetical. It should be in there with the G's. So I'm going to double click on it to run it. It's going to verify that it exists, well, that it meets all the security requirements. Do I want to run it for the first time? I'll say sure, open it. Then we see it here in the top right corner of my screen. It's just a little G inside a black circle. If you're running Windows, you probably see it in the bottom right corner inside the system tray where we saw OwnCloud before. Now it's unhappy right now. I think because I did the update, it hasn't asked for this new key. So for me, I'm going to delete my Globus Connect Personal configuration and exit. So I want to delete this endpoints configuration. And then I'm going to run Globus again, and it should look like the clean version that you're seeing right now. This is what. So the first time you come into Globus, you'll see an initial setup. And this is where it wants that key. So here's the key in that browser window, right? So for me, it's F1E blah, blah, blah. And so I'm going to copy that, and I need to paste that here into the initial setup window. Probably a good idea to keep automatically checked for updates on, particularly if you're concerned about security. I would choose OK. Now Globus is running. I don't have the exclamation point in the top right corner on the icon anymore, which means that everything is running smoothly. So I now have an endpoint called My Laptop. So let's go back to our browser window, and let's see what that looks like. So we're currently in the Manage Endpoint screen where we got the setup key. I'm going to pull down Manage Data, and I'm going to choose Transfer Files. And this will take us back to that two-panel window that we saw before. We should see Compute Canada #silo on the left if that's where you chose to open it. Now we're going to want an endpoint here on the right side. When we click there, we bring up this endpoint box. You should be able to see it inside. These are recently used ones. I should have one called Simpson, S-I-M-P-S-O-N. That's my Compute Canada username. Oh, there it is. There's one called My Laptop. So your user ID, you should be able to start typing that in there, and you should be able to see your endpoint you just created. So I just created one called My Laptop. There it is. And it will go to my desktop. Because the Globus application is running in the background, and it will give me access to my documents. And here is my entire documents directory. We'll go through how to control access to directories and so on in just a moment, because you may not want to share your entire documents directory. Currently it's only shared with myself, so that's pretty safe. But maybe you want to turn it off, or maybe you only want to share portions of that. We'll walk through that in just a moment. But what you should see right now is you should be able to just click a folder, click a file, right? I'm just going to use this news log, which is nothing. And the moment I click a file, one of the buttons at the top turns blue. And if I click that button, it'll initiate the transfer to Silo. Before we go through with this, so you can just go through with it, you're not going to hurt anything in this particular instance, I hope. The options at the bottom of the screen need to be noticed. If you're moving anything substantial, something big that's going to take time, I strongly recommend that you label your transfer. If you don't label your transfer, then, as you'll see in a moment, Globus will label the transfer for you, and it's going to look like that really long string of random characters. And if you're moving multiple files at the same time on separate transfers, it's going to be really tough for you to tell which transfer is which, given those random strings. Easy for the computer, not easy for us visually. So I strongly recommend that you put in a name. So webinar test transfer. Now we have 5 settings underneath. One, we can set it up to sync. So if we're moving an entire directory, it will look and only move new or changed files. So this is really nice because it saves you from having to figure out what's new or changed. It will look through the directory, see what's different, and it'll move only that content. If you want the source, perhaps if you want the destination directory to look exactly like the source, maybe other people have been contributing to one of your repositories, or there's some really old stuff there, you just like it cleaned up, you can choose the second option, which is delete files on destination that do not exist on source, and it will wipe them clean, right? So it'll do a very rigid and severe sync. It'll make it look exactly like the directory or the file or the computer that you're copying the data from. Third option is nice. Not often used, but it's nice to know about. When you move the files to Silo, if you don't turn this on, it will list as the file creation time the date that you made the transfer. So if I make the transfer now and I don't turn this on, it will say that it's May 9th, in 2016 and whatever time May 10th, sorry, whatever time we do the transfer. But if I want this to show the time the file was actually created originally, then I click the box here and it will preserve the time stamps with the files as they come over and not put a new timestamp on to show when it was transferred. So that's the option there. Option 4, verify file integrity. So this is just a quick way doing things like checksum to make sure that the files look the same. It's fast, it does it automatically. I recommend that you have it turned on to make sure that we don't have any corruption in transfer. It's not a guarantee there's no corruption, but it's a good approximation. And then the last option is Encrypt Transfer. This is where you put the checkbox if you want it to do the encryption, full encryption before it does the transfer, and then decrypt it on the other side. Just click the checkbox and it'll look after the rest for you. You should know up front that this will roughly double the transfer time because of the encryption that needs to take place before it gets pushed over. It doesn't increase the file sizes, but the processing before and after takes time. So once you've chosen the transfer settings that you want, we just click the box with the arrow pointing in the direction we want to make the move. So for me, that's the arrow pointing to the left because I'm moving from my laptop, which is the endpoint on the right, to Compute Canada silo on the left. So I'm clicking that. At the top, I get a transfer request successfully submitted. Gives me a task ID, and that's the task ID that I would have to look through if I didn't give it a name. Now it goes away. This is a very fast file transfer for me. It's just 10 kilobytes. It's almost a waste to use Globus, or it feels that way. And so if I come here to Activity, and so this is just above the Transfer Files box, Transfer Files Activity Endpoint Bookmarks. If I come to Activity, we can see here's the transfers. I did a workshop test a week ago to make sure things were working, and I've got a webinar test transfer, which I just delivered. If I click on it, I get a bunch of information. I should also get an email to the account that I used to sign up with Compute Canada saying that the transfer was completed. So it doesn't really matter in this case, but if I had a really big transfer, say I'm moving an entire set of archives or a stack of medical records, really nice to know that this was completed and that the status was successful. If you move larger data, it takes time, then you can watch here, you can come into Activity and you can actually watch the data transfer rates. Right? You can watch if there's temporary failures, if it's trying to retry, if one of the endpoints goes down, you can see that here and you can see it waiting for the next endpoint to come up. So that's it in principle. You can make endpoints pretty much anywhere. You're able to push from personal endpoint to personal endpoint if you turn on Globus Plus, and that's just sending an email to globus@computecanada.ca and asking for this to be turned on. Now the last thing I need to show you with Globus is back on the desktop. So here on OS X, the Globus icon is in the top right corner. If you're using Windows, it's probably in the system tray in the bottom right corner. In either case, you're going to want to click on that icon, and there'll be an option. There'll either be a choice called Options or a choice called Preferences. You're going to want to click on that. And once you're in here, one of the options will be to control access. This is really important because here's where you can turn on and off what directories, what drives connected to your computer have access. So right now I have a directory called opt, and it's shareable right now. These are things that I've already added to Globus. You probably just have your home user account and documents shared for you. And it's probably set so that it's not shareable, which means you have access to it, but nobody else does. And that it's writable, which means that you can move data up and back from Silo or any of the other systems to this computer and back and forth. You can turn that off, and you can turn that off here with the check mark. At the bottom of this little window is a plus and a minus. So if I wanted to kill access to my documents directory, this is not something that I want to have Globus have access to, then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hit the minus sign. And it's going to delete it. And now Globus can see my endpoint but it can't see documents anymore. It can see this directory called /opt, or it can see this plug-in drive, this USB drive, which I'm also going to delete right now, or in just a moment anyways. This matters because you can control what folders you have access to. So if I want to add a folder, I'm going to click plus. And then it's just a matter of me coming in here, navigating through my file manager, and choosing the directory I'd like to share. So maybe I don't want to share all of documents. I only want to share Compute Canada. And I see the browser window here is a little lagging, so I'll wait just a moment. So clicking the plus sign brings me up a folder navigation window. Maybe I just want to share Compute Canada, that folder. That's what I want to have access, Globus to have access to and choose to share with other people. I'm going to choose Open. Now it's here. I can choose whether or not I want it to be shareable, whether or not I want it to be writable. This really, really matters in two cases. One, when you're first setting up, because you want to control what directories you have access to. Maybe you want it to have access to your entire hard drive. You have the option here to do that. It matters as well when you want to move data from portable hard disk arrays or storage devices or USB sticks and so on. Because when you plug those in for the first time, Globus will not have access to them. You need to plug them in, open Globus Personal, the options menu here, and then come down to the little plus sign in the corner, turn it on, and then give that drive access specifically, that drive. This is Globus trying to be very, very secure and not just give anybody that you shared certain parts of your drive with access to anything you plug in. So you need to be very specific here. If you want to plug in a USB drive and transfer it with Globus, it's easily done. Plug it in. Then you're going to choose, you're going to come into the preferences here, the options. You control your access by clicking the plus sign and then choosing that USB drive, right? Or this extra device, which here on OS X shows up on the left. Or a folder within that device if you don't want them to have access to the entire USB system. So this is a question we get a lot is, I can't access my USB drive. And that's because you haven't told Globus it's okay to. And so this is how you do it, by coming into the preferences or the options menu to make that happen. And so that's Globus in a nutshell. There is a command line interface for Globus. They call it the CLI. It's really powerful. It's very nice. And it's not hard to install. It's useful to install on virtual machines in the cloud. It might not always be the preferred way to move data, depending on the cloud system that you're on. They might get worried about their network connectivity. Globus is a great thing to turn on at Starbucks and start pushing data around, given that it eats all the data. You can watch everybody get angry at their phone and start looking around when they can't connect. And that's something that you did, and you can feel secure about that. But you can install Globus on virtual machines in the cloud, even Linux command line machines. It's quite at home there. And then you can use this browser interface to set up data to push and pull. If you're interested in that, I've got a walkthrough on how to do it that I can share afterwards. You can send me an email directly for that, or you can ask for it in the Etherpad page. Do you have any Globus questions? If not, then we'll look to just kind of round this out.
Anyone who's viewing via video, you may just need to, if you do have a question and want to speak up, you may just need to click your microphone button to unmute yourself. But feel free to speak up and interject if you have a question for John. Thanks.
Here's another link for you.
John, I have a comment.
Oh, we got a question. Sure, please.
Not a question, but a comment. For if you have other access to a different own cloud, I know SFU and University of Saskatchewan both have their own enterprise version on campus. you can actually share between the own cloud. So you could basically start with share and just write the own cloud address of the other system. So in SFU case, you'll be the SFU username at vault.sfu.ca, and immediately you share between the two own cloud systems.
Oh, that's really nice. I didn't know that. Thank you, Lixon. So a really nice feature. That's not something we have here at the University of Alberta, but as Lixon's saying, at Simon Fraser and University of Saskatchewan, those are two. Or if you had your own version at home, you could share as well. So if you're looking to not just have separate clouds all over the place and bring them all together.
It's basically called a federated feature.
Yeah, so you can federate. Very nice. I didn't know. Thank you, Lixon. Does anybody other comments they want to throw in or questions, particularly about Globus, before we look to just wrap this up? Not hearing any, but you're welcome to jump in at any time here. The link at the bottom of this screen should take you to the Compute Canada Globus documentation if you'd like to see some additional help. I'll show you here in the browser. I'm just going to type in Globus CLI for command line interface. For those of you who are interested in that, I'm just going to pull off a Google search here. First thing that comes up is how to use the Globus command line interface. And these docs are really, really nice. They're easy to follow. They're generally well explained, even if you're not a strong Linux user or a command line user. And it gives you some nice walkthroughs and how to use Globus in your command line environment, which you'll need to do if you're using certain cloud systems and building your own machine from bits of virtual hardware. So what we've done today, talked a little bit about OwnCloud, which gives you 50 gigabytes of Dropbox-like storage in the cloud. As Lixon has just pointed out, you can chain this OwnCloud instance together with other OwnCloud instances into what we might call a federated cloud to further expand your resources that are available to you. We've also talked about Globus, which is in principle a file transfer tool. It's used to move lots of data from places. They use it at CERN, for example, to push things, push data and information from the colliders that are coming or as it comes out. But you can also think of it as a tool that gives you an interface into storage. And we showed you one piece of storage that you have access to as part of a default allocation with Compute Canada on a site called Silo. And that gives you 1.5 terabytes of storage. Other systems in Compute Canada will give you additional storage as well. This is just an approximation that I think is correct, but you can probably put together about 5 terabytes of storage across all the Compute Canada systems. It wasn't what was intended when those systems were created and those default allocations were set up there, but it's something that Globus enables. So you have the ability to have Dropbox-like storage, 50 gigabytes. You can push a lot of data, and it gives you access to systems like Silo that will give you terabytes of storage. So, in summary, your accounts are controlled by ccdb.computecanada.ca. If you don't have a Compute Canada account, please go there and pick one up. If you're having trouble getting an account or there's an issue there, you can send an email to accounts@computecanada.ca. The link that's on this slide, bit.ly/1 capital H lowercase, /1 capital X lowercase h capital E lowercase m capital F lowercase z. This is a link to the Etherpad page, which will keep open during question period, which we're just about to open, but we'll keep it open a little while after. If you ask questions, I'll watch it for probably the rest of the day. And if you have an email, if you have other questions that you don't want to ask either here or through the Etherpad, you can send them to info@westgrid.ca. And that is cloud powering your research.